When I saw the envelope taped to my front door, I already knew it was from the HOA. In bold red letters, it read, "Notice of violation. Unauthorized commercial activity." I just stared at it and laughed, because that tiny piece of paper, it wasn't just a warning, it was the spark that set everything in motion. They thought they could scare me into shutting down my little backyard nursery, a few herbs, some succulents, a couple of tomato plants. But they had no idea who they were messing with. My name is Mason Holloway. I'm 39 years old, and until recently, I worked full-time in cybersecurity. But after a round of layoffs, I decided to pursue something smaller, something peaceful. I turned my backyard into a small plant business, quiet, clean, and legal. But Evelyn Richardson, the HOA president, didn't like that. Not one bit. Evelyn Richardson, 38, HOA president and self-declared Queen of Green Ridge Estates. I first met her during the HOA meet and greet after I moved in. Perfect bob haircut, pastel sweater, clipboard in hand. "We like things tidy around here," she said, smiling like she meant it as a threat. At the time, I brushed it off. But now, standing there with her letter in my hand, I remembered that smile. And it finally made sense. Evelyn didn't run this community, she owned it. At least in her mind. And my garden? That was a threat to her little empire of control. I should have known better, but I wasn't about to back down. 3 days later, I received the second letter. This one came certified mail. $4,000 fine for unauthorized commercial activity, visual disruption, and increased foot traffic. I was stunned. I hadn't sold more than a few pots of basil and mint to my neighbors. I didn't even advertise. People just stopped by because they liked the garden. But Evelyn had convinced the board that I was running a nuisance operation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from anger. I reread the HOA bylaws. I pulled up property lines, zoning rules, city codes. And that's when I realized Evelyn had made a mistake. A big one. Turns out, the HOA Clubhouse, Evelyn's pride and joy, wasn't technically owned by the HOA. It was on a separate lot deeded to a shell company the developer forgot to transfer. It hadn't been taxed in 4 years. And the city was ready to auction it off. I called a friend who worked in real estate law. "If you buy it before they do, they can't touch it," he said. I stared at the map, heart pounding. Evelyn wanted to crush my little garden? Fine. I'd take her clubhouse and turn it into something better. The auction was quiet. Just me and 2 city clerks. No one from the HOA even knew it was happening. I paid $14,000 for the building, less than the fine they gave me. A week later, I filed papers to rezone it for community small business use. I didn't need revenge. I needed a place where people like me could grow things, build things, sell things, without being crushed by fake power. When the HOA board found out, Evelyn showed up at my door red-faced. "This is outrageous," she said. "You're undermining our authority." I smiled and said, "I'm just planting seeds." 2 months later, the doors opened. The old HOA clubhouse was now a buzzing little weekend marketplace. Handmade candles, garden produce, jewelry, art. The community showed up in force, even people who once voted against me. Evelyn stood at the edge of the crowd, fuming. But she couldn't do a thing. I had permits. I had the deed. I had the law. But more importantly, I had the people. And in the end, that's what she never understood. Real communities aren't built with rules. They're built with roots. Evelyn wasn't done. Just 2 days after the market launched, I received a cease and desist letter taped to my front door like some kind of HOA eviction notice. Signed by Evelyn herself, it accused me of operating a commercial business without HOA authorization, damaging community aesthetics, and lowering property values. It was the most passive-aggressive piece of paper I'd ever read. So I did what any tech-savvy troublemaker would do. I posted it online. Then I framed it, right next to the certificate I received for being named Small Business of the Month by the local chamber. But Evelyn didn't stop at paper warfare. She went on a door-to-door campaign, clipboard in hand, gathering signatures to shut me down. She claimed I was ruining Green Valley's image. What she didn't expect was how many people actually liked what I was doing. For every door she knocked on, someone new visited the market. Customers started coming just to spite her. Her control was slipping, and the more she fought, the more obvious it became. At the emergency HOA board meeting that followed, Evelyn came in swinging. Her voice echoed through the room as she proposed a bylaw amendment to ban all non-residential gatherings exceeding 5 persons. Basically, if you had a barbecue with too many guests, she could fine you. Her real target, of course, was my weekend market. She stood at the front of the room, clutching her binder of bylaws like it was gospel. But the mood had shifted. Parents who brought their kids to my storytime tent, retirees who chatted over homemade jam samples. Even Richard Cooper, the mild-mannered treasurer, looked up from his spreadsheets and asked, "Which specific clause allows us to regulate events on private property?" Evelyn stumbled. She tried to twist language, but it didn't land. The room didn't erupt. It deflated. No one was buying it anymore. Her fear tactics, once so effective, were starting to sound like noise. After her proposal flopped, Evelyn doubled down. She started collecting signatures for a special HOA vote to permanently ban all commercial activities from the neighborhood. She needed 75 signatures to make it official. I could have ignored it, but instead I launched a campaign of my own. I printed flyers, created a short video explaining how the market helped people. I even went door to door, not to convince, but to listen. Stories poured in. A single mom who made rent selling handmade candles, a veteran who found a community. By the time the vote came around, the community center was overflowing. People stood shoulder to shoulder. I stayed in the back. When they announced the vote, 81 in support of the market, 19 against. The silence that followed was loud. Evelyn stood frozen. Democracy had spoken. The mood in Green Valley shifted after that vote. Neighbors who had never spoken before were now chatting at booths, sharing ideas and recipes. I started receiving handwritten thank you notes. One from an elderly woman who sold quilts to pay her electric bill. Another from a teenage boy who ran a smoothie stall to save for college. The market had become more than just a weekend novelty. It was a lifeline. Evelyn had tried to crush community spirit, but instead, she lit a fire under it. I realized something powerful. Sometimes resistance builds more unity than agreement ever could. People weren't just buying produce anymore, they were reclaiming their neighborhood. Then came the news crew. A local journalist caught wind of our little HOA drama and thought it would make a great human interest story. The headline was brutal. HOA fined gardener, lost clubhouse. It went viral within hours. They interviewed vendors, neighbors, even tried to get a comment from Evelyn, who, shockingly, declined. The video spread like wildfire. Strangers messaged me from all over the country. Some shared their own HOA nightmares. Others donated tools and supplies. We became a symbol for people tired of being pushed around. The story wasn't just ours anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever faced petty power and said, enough. All that attention brought scrutiny. A few residents formally requested a financial audit of the HOA. What they found made jaws drop. Evelyn had used $6,000 of HOA reserve funds to hire a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. There were receipts, emails, and even a memo discussing potential legal vulnerabilities. Not only was it unethical, it was illegal. A motion was filed to remove her. Her allies on the board began to distance themselves. Evelyn tried to justify it as protecting the community, but it was clear she'd gone too far. The power she clung to so tightly was now slipping through her fingers. At the next board meeting, Sarah Johnson, my supportive neighbor, stood up and read Evelyn's internal emails aloud. The room fell into an eerie silence. Lines about targeting him until he leaves and creating false zoning complaints echoed like sirens in a courtroom. Evelyn didn't deny it. She simply gathered her things, stood up, and walked out of the room. No apology, no defense, just silence. It wasn't a victory lap moment. No one cheered. But the weight that lifted from that room was undeniable. Her reign was over. A new election was held the following week. Richard Cooper was nominated as the new HOA president. He was quiet, methodical, and most importantly, honest. His first act? Erase all unjust fines, including mine. His second? Reopen the community clubhouse and assign its use to a rotating volunteer committee. For the first time in years, Green Valley felt democratic. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We had pulled our neighborhood back from the brink of authoritarian pettiness. And we did it together. 1 week later, a moving truck parked in front of Evelyn's house. She had officially resigned from the HOA and was selling her home. No goodbye letters, no dramatic farewell speeches, just a cold, quiet exit. I watched from my garden as she loaded a final box into her car. There was no victory in it, just closure. She'd built her life on controlling others, and when that power was gone, so was she. The market continued to grow. We added live music, kids' art tables, and seasonal events. What began as a basil plant in a backyard had become a full-fledged weekly festival. Families bonded over kettle corn. Teenagers volunteered for community service hours. It wasn't just about selling things anymore. It was about connection. The HOA now supported it officially, even funding new tents. Funny how things change. One day my niece came home from school and told me her class had a discussion about community leaders. She raised her hand and said, "My uncle is the guy who made the whole neighborhood a better place." That hit harder than any headline or online comment ever could. I didn't start this to lead anything. I just wanted to plant something and watch it grow. But life has a funny way of taking our smallest intentions and turning them into something way bigger. Funny how it all started with a single plant and a parking ticket. They tried to shut me down, fine me, shame me, but every attempt just rooted me deeper. I found friends I didn't know I needed, a purpose I didn't know I was missing, and a community I would fight for again in a heartbeat. If you're ever told you can't do something because it's not how things are done, just remember this: systems are built by people, and people can rebuild them. Sometimes the best way to beat the system is to grow your own.